clergy can talk forever, and if they can, bishops are even worse. So I just think Tim might be here for a very long time tonight. So eventually, if you think you've had enough, when enough people put their hands up, I'll just stop talking. It's probably the easiest way, really. It's also unusual for me because, of course, you know, as a bishop, I only work one day a week, and it's not today, so this is a bonus for me to be out and about, really. But I'm delighted to come. And as Derek invited me to talk a bit about my life, I thought I would take as a title, if it gets anywhere, A Life in My Day. And the day I've chosen happens to be today. And I'll just share with you perhaps some of the things I've been about as a bishop of the church. And then when I've talked for long enough, if you want to ask me any questions, you're very welcome to do so. But perhaps I might begin with a few personal things about myself so you know where I fit in. The See of Dover, whose title I'm privileged to hold, was created in 1533, one of the oldest bishoprics in this country. It was created for two reasons. First of all, because Dover is important, the gateway to England, but secondly, that the Bishop of Dover would be the bishop who looked after the Diocese of Canterbury for the Archbishop, who's very rarely able to come. And those two things still continue. That I'm bishop, I bear the title of Dover, but I now am in fact the bishop for the Diocese of Canterbury, which is all of East Kent in Anglican terms. So, for example, yesterday, which was my working day, I spent most of the morning in the Isle of Sheppey, which is one part of the diocese. I spent the middle of the afternoon down on the Marsh, which is another part of the diocese, and I spent last night in Godmersham, which is on the way between Canterbury and Ashford, in those three separate sets of communities. So you see something in the area I cover as a bishop. I've been a bishop in the Church of England now for 12 years. This is my second episcopate. I was in another diocese first, and I arrived here in Canterbury on the 1st of January 2010. So I've almost completed the first 5 years of my ministry as the bishop for the diocese. By background, I didn't have faith as a child, so I grew up in a loving home, but where faith was not known. So I'm in that sense a convert to the Christian faith. I was given it in my teenage years, and it's remained with me ever since, and it's a faith I hold very passionately. For some of the reasons I'll try to explain as I talk a bit about what this day has meant and asked of me. I'm married. I'm married to an accountant, which either brings great cheers or great groans in the community. But Margaret is a finance officer in one of the schools there in Canterbury, where we live. And we have one daughter who lives in London, and our daughter Lizzie is a hydrogeologist, which is a word I can just about spell, but as a non-scientist, that's about the end of my knowledge. She spends her life in the decontamination of spoiled land, and in particular what we as human beings have done to spoil the land and how it can be restored back to life again. And that's her work. So the three of us share lots of our life together. Well, how did this day in which my life has taken place, when did it begin? Well, I'm one of those fortunate people, or unfortunate, depending which end of the day you like best of all. I tend to be up very early. Early for me is about 5:30, and that's the time I get up most days. And between 5:30 and 6:30, I try to sit in absolute silence, because I'm a person who will speak forever. And in most of my life is taken up with being out and about in community. So I think it's necessary, if I'm to fulfil my calling, to be quiet. The house in which we live in Canterbury, which we're very lucky, privileged to live in, has a tiny chapel set in the middle of the house. So between 5:30 and 6:30, I sit in the most uncomfortable, demanding silence of the whole day. Uncomfortable because I'm trying to listen. Demanding because listening takes me more energy than anything else I do in my life. Listening to what God may be trying to say to me and through me. If I'm physically in the diocese, as I've been today, then after that I go down and join the community at the cathedral, which is where my seat is as the bishop, and in which I'm part, and I go and join my colleagues there for prayer together. Then this morning asked of me a number of activities. I spent a chunk of the morning talking with people who were exploring what God might be saying to them and through them in their lives. It's a great part of my life to help others to discern what God might be saying to them. I've been ordained now for quite a number of years, not as many as Michael, but quite a few years I've been ordained. And in my life, a great chunk of my life has been taken up with the work of discerning with others what they might do with their lives. And this morning, with three very different people. One of them, one of the brightest, most able 22-year-olds I've met for a very long time, full of energy and passion, not yet formed probably, but still growing and exploring the world around her and the life she's going to lead. So she came with all the passion that we'd hope for in young people. And whenever people say to me, isn't it depressing that young people no longer have passion, I say, what young people are you meeting? Because the young people I'm privileged to meet almost every day of my life certainly have passion and enthusiasm, particularly for the world. Last week, and I'll just trespass back into a tiny piece of last week, I was in 5 of our schools last week, which I often go and visit. And at the end of my visit to a school, I usually have one of those question and answer periods when the children allow me to ask me any question they like, which is always the most daunting period of my life, really, because children always ask the question which adults would long to ask that somehow don't feel appropriate. But one such child said to me last week, at the end of my talk in the school, my work in the school, do you think the world is important? It's a profound question. Do you think the world is important? And I meet lots and lots of young people, thank God for them, who actually believe the world is important. And many of them look at us, who are not quite so young as we once were perhaps, and wonder what we've done to the world. And those young people talk with me passionately, as that 22-year-old did this morning, about injustice. Talk to me about the violence of our world. And she was saying she wanted to do something about it. The next person I was talking to is someone who actually works in the police force, who's a hugely gifted person who works in community liaison. And he and I were talking together about what we would describe as the fractures in our society. He sits on the other side of the passion of young people and often has to pick up, literally pick up, those who fall by the wayside in our world today. Those who often get demonized as those who are out to do no good. And a great part of my life, my whole of my life since I was a teenager, has been spent with working in prisons. There is only, in fact, one prison in this country I've yet to go into. I've been in every other one. And in some of them I've been in prison for quite a long time. So I always say to people, I know Her Majesty's pleasure quite well. And in prison, I meet far too many young people who ought never to be there. And why are they there? Because the world about which that first person was so passionate, the world has failed them. Many people, young men in particular, you find in prison. Many of them unable to read or write. Many of them have no experience of belonging to a stable family life. And they often feel rejected, and therefore they turn to the only thing that they think might give them some help, which is some sort of crime. And most of them get found out, end up in prison, and the cycle starts from there. And it's a shameful thing for our country that 68% of those 20-year-olds who begin in prison, 68% of them return more than once in the life of their life after that. Because, and here I'll be controversial if you like, prison does nobody any good whatsoever.